Hey there, thank you for clicking on this video. In this video, I will be going over the old school D&D rules and mechanics that I put into my Gloomraider role-playing game. If that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned. Hey there, Bradley Loudata here, author of the Gloomraider Fantasy Adventure role-playing game. In a previous video, I went over how the Gloomraider game came to be, and I'll leave a link for that video in the description. But in short, it started out as my Shadowdark role-playing game with a few house rules added from some old school D&D rules, and it became much more than that. And in this video, I'll go over most, if not hopefully all of the old school rules that I put into my Shadowdark game. So here we go. Alrighty. All right, here you see the cover of the basic rule set. This is available for free to download from RPG. Or you can pay what you want as well. Any money I make on this goes towards artwork right now. And this is custom art by John Sikowski. Fantastic artwork. And yeah, I'll leave a link in the description where you can download these rules. Let's go ahead and go over the old school rules that I put into this game. Right here, I'd like to start out just mentioning what I've already said, but it's stated in the rules that Gloomraider is heavily inspired by the family of Dungeons and Dragons role-playing games from the 70s and 80s and the Shadowdark role-playing game. All right, on the Getting Started page, I mentioned the attributes. Write down the following attributes in order: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma. Anyone who's played old school D&D from the 70s and 80s will totally recognize the order of those ability scores. And something many may not know is the order was significant. The first four ability scores, strength, intelligence, wisdom, and dexterity, corresponded to the four original D&D classes: strength for the fighter, intelligence for the magic user, wisdom for the cleric, and dexterity for the thief. And so I corresponded that in my game as well. For under races, you've got human, dwarf, elf, and halfling, which correspond to the original four races that was released with D&D in the 70s. And then for the classes, I changed them up a little bit for the theme of Gloomraider. But Templar would be the equivalent, close equivalent to cleric in the in D&D. In the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook, it mentions that clerics bear resemblance to religious orders of knights in the medieval times. And I borrowed that for the name here, Templar. Warrior, another generic name for the fighter. Warrior, I believe, was level 1 class title for fighter. Delver is the thief class in my game. The idea, though, is that a gloom rating thief has given up their life of being a thief and applied their skills to delving into the gloom. And they adopted the professional title of Delver. And the sorcerer is the magic user. And I use sorcerer because, like in Shadowdark, there is the ability to spontaneously cast with a roll to cast mechanic. And in the original D&D, it had something called a Vancian spellcasting system from the Jack Vance novels, the Dying Earth novels by him, and where you would memorize the spells, and then they would be in your memory until you cast them. And then once you cast them, they were released from your memory, and you had to then re-memorize them. And that spellcasting mechanic is also in my game. So there you go. There's the 4 races and the 4 classes from the old D&D. All right, on this page, it's not really pointing out any old school rules, but just some changes I made uh, in the naming of certain aspects to hopefully avoid copyright issues. And I may change them back to the more D&D type terms if the game I officially release it as a full product, but that's yet to be determined. But I wanted to go over them real quick here so that you had an understanding what they were when I talk about them in the game. The first one on the list, difficulty level, that would be the equivalent in, let's say, 5th or 3rd edition as the DC difficulty check. A defense score would be the equivalent of armor class in D&D. And then scrolling on down here, encumbrance value would be the gear slot and Shadowdark equivalent. Life dice would be the equivalent of hit dice, and then life points would be the equivalent of hit points. All right, here under attribute scores, anyone familiar with old D&D, basic D&D, particularly by Tom Oldbay, would recognize the more bell curve chart for scores between 3 and 18. If you're not familiar, in this game, like in D&D, you would roll 3 6-sided dice, add them together, and that would generate a score for your attributes. And the old D&D went with a bell curve, where 9 to 12 was the average. From 3rd edition D&D on, it went to a more linear. It went from here you can see -3 to +3 is the modifier. In more modern D&D, it goes from -4 to +4, and the average is 10 and 11. So this sticks to the old school way. Over to the right here, you've got the attribute adjustments for Dwarf, Elf, and Halfling. Humans don't have any, as they're the baseline for the game. And I derive these directly from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And the same for the attribute minimums. I didn't include any maximum scores, just 18 for everybody. But for the minimums, for both the races and the classes are included here, and these all came from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons as well. All right, here we're going to go over the races. For Dwarf, Dwarves, they can resist magical spells cast on them, just like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. +1 to melee attacks against goblinoids, and +4 DS, or AC, versus attacks from giants. That's also taken from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Stone Cunning, the idea of this came from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons as well, or I'll start calling it AD&D at this point. But anyways, dwarves were known to be able to have a good chance of recognizing new stone construction and find secret doors and traps made of stone, and also detect sloping passageways underground and direction underground. That's all taken from Advanced D&D, AD&D, and then resist poison as well. That was a trait for dwarves there as well. For elves, they resist sleep and charm effects. Here I wrote with a 3+ on a d20 roll. In AD&D, it was a 90% chance to resist. So this represents that. 3+ is equivalent to 90%. Elves were some of the best at finding secret doors and with shooting with bows. So those were included here. And they were very good at being stealthy naturally. And they would often surprise opponents, like monsters and what have you. And so that's included here as well. And on to the halfling. They also had a resistance to spells similar to the dwarves in AD&D. They also could surprise like elves and resist poison like dwarves. So I included that all here as well. Now here we have something taken from basic D&D from Tom Oldbay, which is the idea of primary attributes. Now I use it differently here. but the idea is sort of the same. Each class has a primary attribute. Fighter has strength, sorcerer has intelligence, Templar has wisdom, and the Delver has dexterity. And it gives certain benefits in this game. All right, here on the sorcerer, similar to the magic user from AD&D, or just basic D&D, but the older editions of D&D. Uh, sorcerer requires a spell book for their spells. They would use the spell book to memorize their spells, and so that's included here as well. Now here on the Templar, they have the turn undead ability. I guess Shadowdark has that as well. And so I guess it's not a different thing, a different old school rule. But anyways, Templars can turn undead like clerics. And also spell casting, similar. They had to prepare them, but do it by praying versus memorizing. All right, alignment is included, as every edition of D&D has. And I went with the 5-axis alignment system. Original D&D had 3, which is law, chaos, and neutrality. And then in the Holmes basic D&D set, I went with a 5-axis system, which was lawful good, lawful evil, chaotic evil, and neutral. So for this game, I went with the 5-axis system. All right, on to languages. Anyone familiar with the Mold Bay basic D&D set, or even the later iterations of it, or call it basic, expert, companion, masters, immortals, BECMI. Anyways, we'll recognize this chart here for the languages, depending on your intelligence score, is how literate you are, and then how many additional languages you can speak. So this is not exact from there, but it's definitely inspired from the old D&D. All right, here in this armor chart, again, anyone familiar with the BECMI edition of D&D will recognize suit armor. Although this existed in AD&D, it's never called suit armor and didn't give you this advantage here. So I included it in this game. Another old school rule. All right, on to level advancement. For experience points, I have the 1 XP per gold piece value. And this is classic for old D&D. That for every gold piece value of treasure you took out and got back to your home base, you would get experience points for that. And as a result, old D&D had experience points requirements for classes in the thousands. So I adjusted it over here. Advancement is in the thousands of experience points because of that. Shadowdark does not have that kind of XP chart, so they have a much different XP advancement. So I changed that. And as far as leveling up, like old AD&D, training is required. Though for me, training is not required to get the second level. In this game, you assume you have enough training, you just need some experience, and then you advance the second level. But to go to third level, you'll have to pay to equivalent of $1,000, $1,000 in gold pieces times the previous level. So to get the third level, it would need 2,000 gold for training. And that concludes the old school rules that I put into my game. There could be some little more minor ones that I missed. And there's also a lot of, I don't want to say unique mechanics, but mechanics that I put in the game that I wouldn't be considered old school D&D, but they are changes from Shadowdark. And I can go over those in a different video if people want. But otherwise, you can just download the rules, like I said, for free and see all that stuff for yourself. Just go through it. And yeah, that's it. That's all I'm going to go over in this video. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments and I'll get to them and answer them. And until then, though, thank you again for watching this video. And Until next time, in tenebras.